Good evening. I'm Providence Mayor Brett Smiley. In just a moment, we'll hear from Rhode Island's Governor Dan McKee. Then we'll ask for comments and an update from Attorney General Peter Neronha, followed by Colonel Oscar Perez, Chief of the Providence Police Department. Shortly, we will be releasing the person of interest who had been detained earlier today, and the Attorney General can speak a little bit about the rationale for that. But we want to inform the community that that individual will shortly be released from Providence Police. We know that this is likely to cause fresh anxiety for our community, and we want to reiterate what we said earlier, which remains true, which is ever since the initial call, now a day and a half ago, we have not received any credible or specific threats to the Providence community. And so the status of safety in our community remains unchanged. And we believe that you remain safe in our community, though we will continue to have an enhanced police presence throughout the city and on the Brown campus. We are once again encouraging anyone who thinks that they might have relevant information to assist with our ongoing investigation to please provide it. These are the same resources that were asked earlier, but to share them once again. You can upload video or photos to the special FBI website created for this incident, which is fbi.gov/Brown University shooting. That's fbi.gov/Brown University shooting, or call the Providence Police non-emergency number of 401-272-3121. Our investigation into this horrific act remains ongoing. It has been ongoing. And I know there's been some frustration from members of the community and others about the language that we've been using about the person of interest and such, and that speaks to directly the fact that this investigation was and continues ongoing, and we will continue to endeavor to not confirm any information that is not yet confirmable. And that is how we can best be transparent with all the members of our community to share the best information that we have. I'd like to invite the governor to say a few words, and then we'll hear from the Attorney General specifically with regard to the individual.
Mayor, thanks. So our position stays the same. The safety of the people in the state is the top priority. The response, an all-in response from the state relative to any of the issues that impact the Brown University or the people who are impacted by this act of violence. And I will continue to tell you that our Colonel Weaver will be here shortly, and we will continue to have a full amount of effort from the state side and the state police. And in addition to that, I just got off the phone with the mayor, with Director Kash Patel, with the FBI, and he also, because I wanted to make sure that he was fully aware of this press event, and he was, and he also committed to continue to bring the resources of the federal government into this case. So right now, it's about the safety of the people that live in the state, that is in the Providence area. The state of Rhode Island will continue to provide all our resources to support the city, the mayor, as well as Brown University and the community at large in the area of Brown University. In addition to that, making sure that we keeping the people safe in the state of Rhode Island. Mayor.
General.
Thank you, Mayor, Governor. I want to share with the people of the state of Rhode Island what this investigation looks like, where we are today, where I anticipate it moving forward. So last night, I wish you could have been with me in the command post where there were literally dozens of Providence police officers working to develop leads in this very difficult case. Difficult, obviously, because of the tragedy that occurred on the campus, but also difficult in terms of developing evidence. That work continues, and it will continue tomorrow. Our prosecutors were there. 6 in total. Our victim services folks were at the hospital. But this is what these investigations look like. I've been around long enough to know that sometimes you head in one direction and then you have to regroup and go in another. And that's exactly what has happened over the last 24 hours or so. Collectively, the team developed leads in a number of areas. One was chased to ground. It led to us detaining a person of interest. And so those words and how we choose those words when we're talking about an investigation matter. And what it means here is that certainly there was some degree of evidence that pointed to this individual, but that evidence needed to be corroborated and confirmed. And over the last 24 hours, leading into just very, very recently, that evidence now points in a different direction. So what that means is that this person of interest needs to be and should be released. I think what is really unfortunate that this person's name was leaked to the public. It's hard to put that back in the bottle, okay? So we're going to proceed very carefully here. There is too much at stake for the victims of this horrific crime and their families to take chances with respect to this investigation. What I anticipate seeing going forward is that our team of prosecutors will be working with the Providence Police Department as the principal leads in this investigation. We will have our resources amplified by the state police, by the FBI, by the ATF, by the DEA, by the Marshal Service, and others as we develop leads and reach and move towards justice in this case. But this could happen very quickly, but it could take some time. And so I'm going to ask the public to be patient with us as we continue to work through the facts in this case. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Oscar Perez. We've known a long time, worked a lot of cases with Chief Perez. He's terrific. He's leading a great team here. Again, I wish you could have seen the work the other night. We have not yet solved this case, but I'm confident we're going to do that. And I'm confident we're going to do that in the very near future. So, Chief Perez?
Thank you, General. Yeah, and good evening. We're here again today, obviously, I'm going to reiterate what the General just stated, as well as the Mayor. This person of interest will be released. And I want to make sure that we all understand that this was a very complex investigation, and it still is. So in the sense, we followed on a lead, and we followed on the specific lead, but we're able to examine every single evidence that led us to this individual. And at that point, that's how investigations work. Investigations will tell us whether something is valid or not, whether something needs to be ruled out. It's not a mistake. It's just how investigations work. And our responsibility is to make sure that we conduct the proper investigations. When I saw you all earlier today, I'm very proud of the detective work that they do. Detectives that worked throughout the night, as the General stated. We're here last night, making sure that we lift every rock, that we investigate everything we needed to investigate, because we're not in the business of putting people in jail that don't deserve to be. And so at this point, we'll continue to follow on every lead that comes our way. Our federal partners are on board. We'll be meeting again tomorrow with them and continue to do the work that we need to do to bring this person who's responsible to justice. And I'm proud to say that in the morning we'll be reuniting with the detectives. Some of the detectives worked all night. They're still working as we speak, and we'll continue our investigations. So, yeah.
Questions?
Do you believe that the person who was in the video that you released last night is still a suspect, or is that the person that you detained and is now being released?
The person that we detained,
The person from the video that you released last night, is that the person you detained this morning?
at this point, we don't have enough evidence to corroborate that, so no.
Do you still think that that person from the video, surveillance video, is the suspect that you're looking for?
Yes, Stephanie. What we saw in the video is the person we're looking for. Correct.
I would describe that person as a person of interest. So there are a lot of unknowns in this case, and that's one unknown, yes, Steph. That's what we're working towards.
So is it safe to say that you all believe at this point is the suspect behind the shooting? Are they still in this community? I know you said there's not danger to this community, but is that person, you believe they're still here? Have they left the state?
Honestly, we have no way of knowing. and the investigation is ongoing. We continue to follow leads that have been developed over the last day and a half, and we're continuing to ask for help. One of the things that Providence Police will be doing, and we should let our neighbors know, is that we are searching for additional video evidence. And so neighbors in the area of Brown University should expect to see Providence Police in the neighborhood canvassing, looking for additional evidence, specifically looking for additional video evidence. And we are looking for additional video evidence. There's been several questions over the last day and a half about videos at Brown and in the building. The videos at Brown in the building have been examined, and at this time we have no additional actionable information from the video that has been reviewed from the building. And so we are looking for new and additional video evidence, and neighbors in the community should expect to see Providence Police along with our partners, and we're again very grateful for the resources we've received from the state police because of the governor's support and our federal partners. But that is one piece of additional evidence and a way in which this community can help. If you have a camera and you are nearby, the video that was released was the corner of Hope and Waterman Streets. And if you are in that area and you have video, you have home video, Ring camera, security camera, you're a small business owner, please reach out to us. Call that number, 401-272-3121, or if you can upload the video itself, you can do so at fbi.gov/Brown University shooting.
So the FBI director specifically said in his tweet that it was a tip from Providence Police that led you all to Hampton Inn. Can you confirm if that's true, and what exactly was the evidence that led you to this person of interest?
Yes, so it was there was a tip that came in, just like we were taking any other tips, and that one came in specifically identifying a person of interest, which was this individual. And so our detectives got on it, just like they got on others, but in this specific one, it was actually picked up by the FBI, and they followed through with it, and they ended up coming and locating this individual of interest, and at that point, we did a thorough investigation, examined, ended up drafting some search warrants, came up with some evidence, but that evidence was examined, and we didn't have enough, obviously, to be able to prosecute anybody, and so the person was released. Go ahead, Tom.
Chief, actually a question to the Attorney General. What is the standard in the state of Rhode Island for detaining someone before they are charged? How long are you allowed to do that? And I guess ultimately, if this individual who was detained is not found to have been part of this, will the Attorney General's office or the state of Rhode Island exonerate him in writing?
Well, Pat, what the case law tells us is that we can detain someone for a reasonable period of time if there is evidence such that points to that person being involved in criminal activity. And so, evidence doesn't appear on your doorstep and you have answers to it within the first 15 minutes. So let me just paint what I hope will be a clear picture. There's obviously evidence at the scene. That evidence at the scene may link to a particular individual. So when you have a person of interest, you try to link the evidence at the scene to that person of interest. Well, that takes time. That requires testing. Some of that lab testing can take an entire day. So over the course of the day, while we're following up leads elsewhere, those initial leads may come back positive or may come back negative. Here they came back negative, so we're in a position where we are now going to release that person of interest. But that's the way these investigations work. This isn't. Well, look, Pat, I'm not going to get into exonerating people in writing or orally or otherwise. There was a quantum of evidence. There was a quantum of evidence which justified detaining this person as a person of interest. We continue to do our job. We're going to keep doing that. There may be other persons of interest. Hopefully they will be in custody or detention very soon.
Weapons. There were multiple reports describing weapons that were found at the scene. Can you say whether or not there were weapons recovered at the scene, and does that describe the evidence that you described that may have linked to the person?
Listen, I am not going to, and I can't imagine the chief would either, is to lay out directly what evidence is at the scene. But what I'm telling you is, at any crime scene, there is evidence that links the perpetrator to the crime. When you have a person of interest, you try to link them to that particular evidence or her to that evidence.
Are you concerned now we're waiting
It
for.
could be all kinds of evidence, Steph. It could be fingerprint evidence, it could be ballistic evidence, it could be DNA, it could be a whole host of things.
Can you explain exactly what eliminated him?
I'm not going to get into that.
I noticed
It's safe to say that the
FBI is here tonight. Can you tell us more about the role? I know it's been emphasized that Providence Police will be the head here.
Yeah.
Kind of the role of what that looks like.
Well, look, in a situation like this, and I go back to the double homicide of Amy Shute and Jason Burgess 25 years ago, it's all hands on deck to try to canvass locations, look at electronic evidence, identify witnesses, track those witnesses down. So every agency brings something else to the table. State police certainly bring something to the table. But ultimately, this is Providence's case, and they are the lead here, and they have the most boots on the ground to do most of the work that needs to get done.
I know the person was detained for hours on end today. Can you talk about what happened during those hours-long detention? Were they questioned that entire time? What did that look like when this person of interest was detained?
Yeah, well, again, I'm not going to get into the details of that, but what I will say is over the period of time that a person of interest is detained, again, you try to develop evidence to bring potential charges against that person. And if you can't develop that evidence, then you release them. That happens plenty of times in the course of our criminal justice system here and everywhere else. So while that was being done, Providence and our law enforcement partners continue to work other leads. That work continues now, and we'll pick it up again in the morning and keep going.
You mentioned the cameras on Brown University's campus. Are you all utilizing that footage as well in this investigation, or was that 10-second clip released yesterday? Is that all we have with this?
That was the video evidence that was deemed most useful at the time to try to apprehend a suspect.
Mayor Smiley, you mentioned the video as well. Can you explain exactly what made other videos, I guess, not as helpful? Because there were other pieces. Can you explain, I guess, what videos have you guys been able to look through and what made those videos not as helpful to the public? Because I imagine at this point in the game, anything can be useful, so why not release what we have?
So because the investigation is ongoing and it may end up later being useful to then connect a dot, we're not going to release information that might be used at a future point in this investigation. But because the question has come up many times in our previous briefings, I wanted to be clear, because it seemed like there was this unanswered question of or concern that perhaps the video evidence inside available from Brown had not yet been reviewed. It has been reviewed, and as the General pointed out, the video that was shared to the public yesterday, I think it was yesterday, is the most useful video that we have at this time that can be shared with the public for the purposes of helping identify an individual.
I think that's understandable, but if there is, I guess, video evidence that you guys have that will be helpful for the investigation or further cases, but could also, someone in the public could see that and know exactly who that person is, I guess, how do you manage that when we are now, more than 24 hours out?
If we had that video, you'd have that.
So
Obviously, if there was a piece of video where we can show you a face and say, this is our person of interest or suspect, you'd have it. So we're releasing video evidence that helps solve that problem and answer that question. Not all of the other video that may be something useful in a prosecution down the road.
These kids were sitting in a classroom. What are you telling people now that we don't have a suspect in custody? Right? Should we be concerned? Should we be staying inside? What do you want the public to know?
So this is a similar situation to where we found ourselves yesterday morning, which is we spent that first night and appreciated the shelter in place allowed Providence Police and our partners the freedom to move more quickly, to gather evidence, to work a complex crime scene. That first chapter of this investigation has concluded, and so when we lifted the shelter in place earlier, it was because we felt that it was an appropriate time to do so. all we had in custody was a person of interest, or in detention was a person of interest. But the reason, that was not the reason that the shelter in place was lifted. The reason the shelter in place was lifted is because, again, since the initial call came in at 4:05, a day and a half ago, we have not received a single additional specific threat to the Brown community, to the Providence community, to the Rhode Island community. And so police had and appreciated the flexibility and to have fewer people on the streets to be able to do their job. And there is no reason that we are not recommending at this time a new shelter in place. We do not feel it is necessary. As I mentioned at the outset, in order to provide an enhanced sense of safety, you will see an enhanced law enforcement presence in Providence and on the Brown campus. But that is so that people can have the confidence and comfort to still take their kids to school tomorrow, to, if Brown's canceled classes for the rest of the semester, but we know some kids are still making travel arrangements to head home, to do so calmly, safely, and we want to provide that extra comfort with an enhanced law enforcement presence.
Colonel Perez, we're seeing there's some reports coming in right now about shots potentially fired near the main ring, police currently in Rockefeller Library. Is there any validity to that, or are those false reports on social media?
So the call just came in just now.
That's what we're seeing.
Yeah, so at this point, obviously, we'll be responding, but it's too early to tell if that's actually inaccurate. A lot of times those calls come in and they're not confirmable, but we'll check on that. Yeah.
Do you see daily updates moving forward on this? What can we expect, you think?
Yeah, we can expect, obviously, police presence. You can expect us, the police department, continuing to follow leads. You can expect what the general and the mayor has stated, working with different of our federal partners. And you can expect that we're going to work extremely hard to bring that person that's responsible for these acts to justice.
And yes, we will expect to brief regularly going forward. It's hard for me to say what that frequency will be, but the community deserves to know the progress that we're making in this investigation, and we will share that progress. And from time to time, if there is no update, we will come up and say there is no update. I'm sure that I was asked many times this morning if the Providence community should breathe a sigh of relief, and I said they should. I imagine that the Providence community feels a little bit more anxious right now than they did an hour ago, and I understand that. And so we will provide regular updates going forward so that we can be as honest and transparent as we can be through this process, because that is the best way for our community to trust the officials and law enforcement officers who are working really hard on their behalf right now.
Attorney General, I'd ask you respectfully, well, first of all, let me claim that most of the people in this room are familiar with at least the basics of the rules of evidence. We understand the complexity of police investigation and the need to maintain the integrity of this. But the question that we continually receive from Rhode Islanders is that in a state where somehow, if you have a speeding ticket and a flop camera or some other speeding camera can capture you, how you can have a position where there's hundreds of cameras in that immediate area, maybe thousands, in fact, I'd love to know how many. How is it possible not to have any other evidence surrounding this? And this is ordinary Rhode Islanders reaching out to law enforcement, and they're confused by that, and quite frankly, some of them are terrified.
Well, look, there just weren't a lot of cameras in that Brown building. Is the reality? It's both of my kids were engineering students and were in that library a lot, class of 19 and class of 22. The reality is it's an old building attached to a new one, so there just isn't, Pat. I don't know what to tell you, but we're going to go out and find whatever evidence we can to solve this case as quickly as we can. I mean, we're not holding back video that we think would be useful, and I don't think I should even have to say it.
If I could clarify, General, there's a difference between you don't have enough evidence to charge someone and clearing them of any suspicion. Are you clearing this gentleman of any suspicion in this case?
Yeah, look, I think it's fair to say that there is no basis to consider him a person of interest. So that's why he's being released. We still have a lot of steps left to take, obviously, in this case. Again, I've seen enough. After 30 years in law enforcement, there have been a lot of twists and a lot of roads that I've walked down. And so I'm not here to predict anything other than I saw in the command post in the 6 or 7 hours I spent there last night, 50 Providence police officers working really hard And they continue to work really hard to solve this case, along with a bunch of prosecutors, federal agents, the colonels, good people on the state police. And I know that's going to continue. And that our prosecutors are embedded with these detectives and agents, and we're going to solve this case. I can't tell you what direction it's going to take right now, but we're going to solve it.
What happens next as far as the investigation and obviously finding the person responsible?
There's a ton of things that happen next. And so I don't want to get into all those things because obviously we have a murderer out there, frankly. And so we're not going to give away the game plan. But the fact of the matter is that law enforcement has the tools necessary to solve this case. But we're 36 hours out. So, you know, it can never be too fast, particularly for the victims and their families and parents. But sometimes investigations take a little bit of time. Sometimes it's not as easy as having a photograph of the person that we can just give to you to help us find that person. But I know the team's going to work hard and we're going to solve it.
You mentioned all the tips that have come in. How difficult does it become, given the amount of time since this happened, in terms of the scope of the investigation? Obviously, this person could be anywhere now, right?
Yeah, we follow on every single tips, and that's why it's important to be able to collaborate with different agencies, municipalities, different federal partners, and it's important to have it's all hands on deck, and we follow on every single one, and that's what occurred in this specific incident. We follow up on a lead. There's nothing, we got to lift every rock, and the reason for that is to make sure that to realize if he's valid or not, to rule things out, and to make sure that we verify whatever's coming our way. To your call earlier, it was unfounded. There was actually several cars responded, and there was nothing located. So.
Thank you, sir.
Judge, that'll be it for questions tonight. Those are all the updates that we have to share this evening. We will stay in touch for the next briefing and be sure to keep you posted. Future briefings will be at this location, so you can plan accordingly. Thank you.